Hi there, you're just in time to witness a downward spiral. Join me, why don't you? So I haven't done one of those dungeon tree videos in some time, and that's because the Dollar Tree that I live near has not really rotated its inventory. Sure, they're getting the seasonal stuff in, the autumn, the Halloween and all that, but nothing that I'm really inspired by. I also live near a Family Dollar, and maybe that distinction ends up being important, maybe it doesn't. It kind of depends on where else this inventory is available. But Family Dollar isn't really known for being like the cheapest, the lowest of the low price store. It's like you can go into a Dollar General. Just because it has dollar in the name, and maybe sometimes people will refer to it in the local community as the dollar store, it's not really the place you go and expect everything to be like the dollar, like Pound Town or Dollar Tree or the 100 yen store. Is that the Daiso in Japan? Point is, I don't make it a focus to look for things and be inspired by them and make videos about the content that I find at that store in particular, but I could not help myself this last visit. This took me by surprise, and it kind of set me on a strangely evergreen path because of the nature of the stuff that I found. Something that I never really considered before because it's never really been presented to me in this way. It hasn't really struck the chord that it could have been striking this whole time. So welcome home, brave heroes. I'm Ash, this is AshQuest, and today we are going to test my abilities to make up game rules. And we're also going to provide you with a really cool skirmish game that you might agree that it's really cool. At the very least, it's going to be very interesting, it's going to be accessible, and I'm going to explain why it's going to be interesting. Don't run away just yet. The total damages, though, before we do anything, I don't know if I'm going to make use of these just yet, but we'll go ahead and call that the $2. Puffy stickers, $2. Obviously, our 4 boxed village sets. Gonna go ahead and just mark that off as a $20 investment. So we're at 24 so far. I got a dish drying mat, the purpose of which will be explained shortly. We are $3 more, so we're at 27. And I kind of cheated. I didn't think about finding a range ruler of any kind. Even though if I'm going to be designing a skirmish game and it's not going to be using tiles of any kind, this is pretty mandatory. So I got these at Dollar Tree a little bit later after the fact when I had the opportunity. Now, I don't believe you would have any trouble finding a ruler at Family Dollar in the stationery/school supplies aisle. And I'm certain that you would find it for about the same price as you would at Dollar Tree. So another $1. So we're at 23, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, call it 29, $30 after taxes, give or take some change. And that's all we are going to be at. So what did I end up getting in terms of miniatures? Well, here's what we got for one of our 6-piece village sets. Autumn themed, we have a well, a pair of pumpkins, a fairy sitting on a log holding a gourd, a pumpkin house, a sign that says welcome, and a hedgehog with some mushrooms stuck to its spines. I actually really like that. For the second autumn collection, we have a gnome, a squirrel holding a nut, a basket of apples, a mailbox, a light post, and another house, this time a tree. Moving on to the Halloween decorations, I am very partial to this. This is something that I would have bought on its own outside of wanting to make a video about anything gaming related. This is just a really, really cool little house sculpt. I like that so much. But that's what we get. We get a crow on a keep out and danger sign. Actually, love that. We get the skeletal bride and groom, a skeleton with a beware sign. He's actually like the perfect scale for other miniature type games. Yeah, you could just use this sign. That is so fun. A pile of skulls with a crow and a bat taking residence and a gravestone. And then for our second box of Halloween minis, we've got some little trick-or-treat ghosties, very cute. A dog holding it looks like a purse in a ghost outfit. Could be a trick-or-treat bag, I don't know. Another dog that has been mummified. It's very cute. With a pumpkin, a couple of crows on pumpkins near a fence, a happy Halloween sign, and another pretty awesome little miniature village house. So I'd like to make a skirmish game out of these components, but I'd like to take it a bit further as well and really draw from the older Games Workshop asymmetrical games of around 45 years ago. And just in case you ever need this stuff or you want to follow along one-to-one exactly, we have our unique UPCs here for the Halloween villages, the unique UPCs here for the autumn villages. These figures are cast in what is that, like a resin, I believe. If it breaks, it glues back together, but they should be suitable for indoors or outdoors. You could use these as fairy houses, or is that what they're called? Am I thinking of fairy doors? They do have fairy doors. I did a video on fairy doors, actually, not that long ago. Huge resin, mystical, fully painted door sculpts that you can use to mark boss locations in your HeroQuest game. And watching me take this stuff out, you might think, Ash, you are off your rocker. You have officially passed the 40 mark. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Look, when the inspiration strikes, I can't help it. That's a very satisfying sound. Plus, I knew that when I was all done with my ideas about skirmish gaming, that these really wouldn't take up a whole lot of room. A lot of them are perfectly suitable to just keep as household Halloween decorations to drag out every, I don't know, past Mabon. And since we live in the Midwest, we will keep them out until New Year's. About $20 worth of stuff, and it's totally possible that you'll find stuff like this or very, very similar for just, like the $1.25 or $1.75 or whatever the heck the Dollar Tree is charging for this kind of stuff these days. I know I think this exact sculpt, although I believe I saw the leaves painted green, which just adds another dimension to this. You can have different colored sculpts. You could reuse the same sculpts for a brand new product and really go all in on the Games Workshop idea. In Autumnlands, Seasons of War, the Mabon Fae live in harmony according to rules and traditions that extend beyond our human history. It is because of these traditions and agreements amongst the Fae kind that time is able to move in a seasonal fashion in this mythical world. If you'd like to expand on this and say that it is due to the Fae pacts that govern the axial tilt of the Earth, then that's a nice magical way of explaining the science as well. In these ethereal lands, the festivals of the secular world give life back to the spirits of bounty and of harvests, and sustain them for the wait in between their time in the endless cycle. Celebrations are what the Autumnlands need to flourish and for its people to thrive, and the nature and intensity of each celebration, no matter how big or small, can affect the realm in a variety of ways. Many large and long festivals can provide these magical lands with abundant energy for the Fae to return in kind the following season. Between the celebrations is just as important, however. It is during this time the Fae live and interact with one another on their own, and over the centuries they have formed bonds, communities, and even entire kingdoms. This season, things have taken a turn. Thanks to human traditions becoming more erratic, the energy shared by the festivals celebrating the dead has grown, becoming out of harmony with the time-honored pacts of the Fae. I wish every day was Halloween. I know, right? I sure wish that desire didn't have any ethereal, otherworldly consequences. Oh well. Now, the guardians of the Kingdom of Harvest must stay vigilant against the forces of Spookyvale, a pocket dimension of the Samhain Fae, from which cobbled versions of Fae-kind emerge, mindless, out of time and out of space. They intrude with intent to possess the Autumnlands, creating an entire season during which the veil between worlds remains at its thinnest. If the Spookyvale manifestations overtake the Kingdom of Harvest, the Fae Pact of the Autumnlands will be broken, disrupting the seasonal cycle and threatening both the realm of the Fae and the lands of the mortals. Muster your ghosts and your gnomes, and let the seasons of war begin. Okay, the first thing to do with any of these games is to establish the playing area where the game is actually going to be played, and if we are lucky, it will be double-sided. It all becomes clear now. Don't laugh. This is all I could find. I looked for table runners, I looked for placemats. This is what I got. This is our backdrop upon which this game of spookiness versus lovely fall pumpkin spiceness will be played. Double-sided, it is double-sided, so this can represent really the most abstract of Fae universe concepts, and honestly, it's just going to depend on what your taste is. You can either have this just red, and we can think of this as red grass. I mean, there's nothing wrong with thinking of this as like the deep autumn orangey reddish. There is an orange grass that exists, right? I'm not just going crazy. This looks like it could be absolutely fine. Initially, I was thinking it could be played here, and this could kind of represent just the Autumnlands in general, but it looks really dumb, and when you're placing your miniatures on it, I don't know. Now, there's something to be said about using each of these flowers as a sort of space. And if you didn't want to use the rangefinders and you wanted to play this sort of super simplified skirmish game wherein all of your miniatures can travel one space each, no, I don't want to use the bucket of apples as a war miniature. Here we go. The gnome is obviously going to be the leader of this kingdom of the Autumnlands. Is he missing a hand? He's missing a hand. I don't know where that went. I can't glue it back together. Hold on. No, there's no hand. There's no hand. Aw, my miniature's defective. I had to send it back in and get a replacement. You could absolutely say that each of these miniatures has a movement value, and then you can, well, we're going to have to do that anyway. Everybody's going to have a movement value anyway, but the super simplified version is one space, bam, and then you can move them one space, bam. Anywhere that there is a fully fledged flower, that's a space. You could do that, and you could also say that they are able to maybe attack miniatures that are one space away, or on the same space. These are big enough to accommodate more than one miniature. We could absolutely explore that possibility, but I kind of want to get into the pure range of it all, and I think I would rather things take place on this bloodied looking field. Next, we have our resin statues to unbox to make up our warbands. We obviously have two groups representing the Harvest Kingdom and Spooky Vale. We have enough miniatures to create a small warband for each faction, as well as various scenery and props that we can use for the actual gameplay. When I say warband, I want you to think of the types of warbands that Games Workshop uses for Warhammer Underworlds. You rarely get like more than 5 minis. I shouldn't say rarely. It's pretty frequent to get like 6, 7. You rarely get more than that, though. So we have 2 sort of centerpiece house miniatures that come with each of these, and we need to establish the categories for the rest of them. So we've got our non-house scenery, and then we've got our things that could be alive, and I actually really want to use this pile of skulls with the bat and the crow as a moving warband piece. It's a bit of a stretch, but I would just like to have 5 on this side. You could just as easily say that this is a piece of scenery. We can get into alternate rules and so on shortly, okay? We have a squirrel. This little guy is going to be part of our warband. We have a mailbox, welcome sign, a gnome, a basket of apples, a hedgehog, a fairy child enjoying a gourd on a log. For the most part, the Autumnlands portion, the Mabin Fae, that's going to be scenery. For the gameplay, I want something scalable, because while these decorations are the ones available now, dollar-type stores have these resin scenery pieces almost all year round for every season and most major holidays. If we want to get total sandbox with this concept, then you can buy and use anything at all, and that's kind of the double-edged sword of accessibility and then creativity going off the rails. You're setting yourself up for overstimulation with that, and then this whole idea becomes moot. Scale creep becomes more like scale dump, and you're like, oh, but here's a thing I could do, here's a thing I could do, and then you end up not doing anything, trust me. If you'd like to maintain a sort of standard to keep things consistent and also give you something to look forward to, you can, and in my opinion, you should, limit the legal pieces to these types of statues sold at the same store from where you buy these initial figures. I'm not saying you have to buy these exact sets, but going out and buying a spattering of different resin statues for homes, scenery, and characters. And again, we will touch on what the scenery could mean. I don't want it to just be set pieces. I don't want it to just be blocked areas for a line of sight. Now, wherever they sell the next round of season to get and supplement your existing warbands with appropriate sculpts, it'll feel like a true expansion to the game, a new tournament season. Anyway, scalable means planning for the future, so we won't use every combination of every stat available for our beginner pieces, whatever we come up with here shortly, and we'll leave plenty of functionality for future expansions. Since I have a few of these sculpts from earlier in the year and last year already, we can use these as examples of what future expansions with supplemental rules might look like. We are using the freeform movement instead of hexes or squares, and that's why we need the ruler. Rangefinder, distance tracker, open. Don't want to use a dark one. It's hard to see the numbers. It's a ruler package opening ASMR. Here we go. I think we'll use the green one. Kind of got a neon sort of ectoplasm look to it off camera anyway. think it's just going to be the easiest to read because of the contrast. You'll probably want to pick up a clear one, and I probably had the option of picking up a clear one, but I thought the colored ones looked cooler, and now I'm paying the aesthetic price. Oh yeah, the green one's definitely easiest, although the red one, or the pink one, has the most theme once it's against the battle mat. If you have appropriate Loki battle mats or whatever, you could use that. But again, I want you to limit your playing pieces to the Dollar Tree. Dollar General, I know, sells some brand of resin statue stuff. And then apparently Family Dollar does as well. Okay, so what are we going to use each of these pieces for? I got the puffy stickers and the spider rings because I don't want to use pen and paper to track stats, and I don't want to have to use a lot of tokens. So we're going to use whatever these end up being for our tokens. And I'm not entirely 100% sure that we're going to use the spider rings, but yeah, it's more Halloween based, and so it might end up being for the Samhain Fae side. But I kind of think that this goes against my whole idea. We're going to challenge ourselves and not use those at all. This kind of goes against the Maven Fae as well. But we kind of need something. Maybe we'll challenge ourselves to not use the stickers at all, and we just took another $4 off of our budget. Okay, so the houses might have to be where our figurines spawn in. We'll go ahead and place one house at the edge of the mat. And since we have 4 houses, we can place up to 4, one for each edge, and you can take it in turns to place these. So the player playing the Samhain Fae has placed first. And now the Maven Fae player is going to place their area first. And you can do this along any point of your chosen edge, and you could do opposing edges or you could do adjacent edges. It's really not going to matter, but the player that places second is basically going to determine exactly how the warbands are going to be set up once they've placed their base of operations. So they've decided to be a total jerk, and they're going to place their pumpkin as far away as possible from the first player's spawn point, but this does not deter the first player. They're going to set down their spooky haunted house, their second spooky haunted house, right next to the pumpkin player. Look at that. This is spite incarnate, and I live for it. So now our pumpkin player is questioning their choices, and they've decided since the top 3 edges are taken, they're just going to have to make the most out of the bottom edge, and they'll just place theirs dead center. No pun intended. Okay, we take out the living pieces, and now we're going to take it in turns to place our scenery bits and our warbands. Because we're going to have our warbands spawn in at the beginning, but I actually want us to start off with a couple on the board. So we can have 2 that we can place directly on the board to begin with. So you could take any of these and place them on the board. It's your choice. You're going to take it in turns, though. We will actually say that the Autumn Fae player is going to go first with this, since they did not go first with the home placement. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about the different kinds of scenery. Finally, some of these are really just going to be set pieces that do nothing but block you, sort of form a line of sight, line of movement blocker, and there's not going to be anything wrong with that. If the bases are touching, they can touch, that's fine. You can touch your own objectives, or I'm sorry, your own set pieces. We'll just call these set pieces for now. To your own set pieces, you cannot touch them directly to your opponent's set pieces, but you can place them very close. The reason for this is because a lot of these miniatures are going to be various shapes and sizes, and I want it to be set up where if you are ready to move your miniature, you have to move them in a straight line. And as long as no part of the sculpture touches any part of the sculpture of the set piece, they are not blocked from moving. They can move just fine. So then, none of these miniatures are going to be so small that they're able to fit between the tiniest of gaps. So why would it matter if you can't place your set piece right next to an opponent's set piece? Well, I want it to be not blocking line of sight if you have a gap there. So this will actually not block their line of sight. They can see through these 2 pieces. They can't travel between them, but if they have a ranged attack, they can fire their ranged attack through here. Now, obviously, this tiny little viewport, this is going to provide us with almost no line of sight. The opposing player's miniature is basically going to have to be right here, anywhere in this line. But still, that provides us with just a little bit of playful, loose ruling, and I like how it feels, and I like how that sounds. So Okay, so what do we got here? We have a sign. This sign is just going to be a scenery bit for now. We have a mailbox, scenery bit for now. It's kind of not wanting to stand up due to the cushiness of the dish mat. So if you end up getting like a placemat after all, I think that's going to be the way to go. Not something cushy, although strangely enough, it's got kind of a bit of immersion for the grass that it represents, which is funny. Okay, stuff like this fence and these pumpkins, this bucket of apples, this well. We need to establish some kind of rules that says no matter what, we have no idea what kind of miniatures are going to come out the next season, right? So it could be truly random, but whatever they are, we should have some rules kind of pre-written to cover for whatever the form that they may take is. So I would like to say that we're going to have objectives, and any set piece can be an objective, but what's the nature of the objective? We have consumables, we have interactables, basically, and then we just have blocked areas. So the set piece only exists to block you, and that's it. For the interactables, I think your model needs to touch the model of the set piece, and then you can use your action to interact with it, and that will gain you a benefit of some kind. For this initial spattering of these set pieces for the Maben Fae, I will say that the bucket of apples is a consumable, and when you have placed your model next to it, you can heal that model by 1. 1 what? I don't know yet. We're not using wound trackers. We've tossed our stickers. Actually, I have a better idea. This is not going to heal you in the slightest. When you place your miniature next to it, your miniature gains a ranged attack for as long as they are touching this base, because they are reaching into the bucket, pulling out an apple and throwing it. So that's what I'm going to do with that. For the light, this is actually going to act as a sort of barrier against the warbands of the opposing side, specifically the Samhain Fae. We can have this emit magical Maben Fae energy as well as light, and so the Maben Fae are protected under it. Therefore, they are going to be protected against any of the other seasonal warbands. So when a model touches the base of this and you use an action to interact with it, then we are going to give this a protective distance, and you will be protected from attacks from the opposing side. However, on your very next movement, you have to move. You have to move your model. And if you move your model in a straight line, it's going to be in some way, shape, or form away from this object, and you will no longer have that protection. So we're just going to call that basically a 1 turn of protection. But it's just as easy for you to move a different model into its range and touch it. But the protection should only apply to the model that's touching it. So instead of it being a range of inches or whatever, I'm just going to say that it protects the model touching it. Okay, that's not too bad. Large pumpkins, I would prefer just to be like a wall. Anything that's like a fence, that's going to be like a wall. If your model has wings, no matter what it is, we are going to be able to fly over the walls, so they will not be affected by walls. So whatever model that you end up picking up that has wings, you can fly. You can fly over anything that would block you. You just can't land, obviously, on things that would block you. The well, man, if I was using any sort of token whatsoever to represent the wounds and such, I would be using this well to heal, I think. Drinking well water. But I think I'm going to call it an objective. We'll protect this well. Yeah, we will try to keep the well from falling into enemy hands. This is going to be a stationary piece, and if an enemy model ends its turn touching the well, that will be a problem. I don't know exactly how we're going to enact that or have it show in the game mechanically, but I think that this would be a great objective piece. So we have wall, and then we have 3 interactables, and that's what we've got for the Maben Fae. Okay, for the Samhain Fae, we have a sign with a crow on it, keep out, danger. We'll just go ahead and have that be, and we'll come back to that actually. We have a skeleton, beware. That's a fabulous skeleton, little kick up. Yeah, love this sign. I love this little sculpt. These would be so great since they are touching, and they're not touching bases, but they are technically touching to block a player's movement and their line of sight, I would think. We'll have to think about rules on that. Like, should they have to touch bases, or can they touch in general? I think it would be better if they just touched in general, since we're going to have a lot of sculpts that might extend beyond their base in some way. Don't know yet. We have a gravestone, and we have the Happy Halloween sign with the little jack-o'-lanterns. Okay, so the most hallowed object here would be the gravestone. We don't want any of the Maven Fae coming over to this gravestone and disturbing the rest of the creature that sleeps under. If a Samhain Fae touches this fence, then the crows will go attack. So that gives them a ranged attack. I'd like to do something with this Happy Halloween sign. Maybe this is the object that you interact with in order to give yourself a protection from attacks for that turn. All right, so we've only really come up with 3 types of interactables and barriers. And we've done that for both sides, which is a little bit lazy. I'd like to come up with something different for this side. It is going to be, or should be, set up to be anyway, asymmetrical. So it would seem a little imbalanced, but it should still be fair to some degree. We can always tweak it later, but let's go with that for now and establish the placement rules. So your one player is going to place down their basket of apples. Second player is going to place down their fence. All right, what are the rules here though? We should say that you can place your warbands, your initial starting warbands, anywhere between your 2 placed spawn points. And so can your opponent. So because they kind of intersect right about here. This is about the area where the 2 Maven Fae and the 2 Samhain Fae houses intersect. Nobody should place any warbands here. It should be able to be kind of loosey-goosey with the rules there and just kind of eyeball it and place stuff. The idea is to have fun, not to get too rules lawyery, but if you want to get rules lawyery, don't place miniatures in the line established by your opponent's bases. Okay, but what about objects? Objects should always go outside of the lines of sight, so to speak, of your linked spawn points, your linked houses. And as long as you follow that rule, place away. So we'll place our apples here because that's just outside of our houses. Then the opponent places his fence here. Then the Autumn Fae player places the pumpkins here. Then the Samhain Fae player's like, this is kind of like in my line. So the Autumn Fae player, the Maven Fae's got to move it over here. And they're like, well, I don't even know if I want it there now. I'll put the wall here. Yes, there we go. Now they'll be able to have their warband kind of run over here and hide behind the wall and throw the apples. It'll be great. Samhain player hasn't picked up on this yet. They placed their Happy Halloween here. I kind of want to make it a rule where you have to place your objective type scenery past the line. I need to come up with a name for this line, the enemy line. And the enemy line will be the line that's formed house to house. But like the origin, it depends on the furthest point. So you obviously are going to have a Samhain house here and here. So what is across the enemy line considered? Is it this side or this side? Well, if it's this side, it's going to be really close to this house. If it's this side, it could be closer to this house. But any units that spawn in from this side will have a really, really hard time getting all the way over here past this line because of the distance. I'll have to think about that. That doesn't seem clean at all. We'll just place the objectives kind of in the center for now. And I'm actually going to not place this, don't, and say we did because it just won't keep from falling over. Okay, it's time to place the warbands. This is a little easier. The Samhain player goes first, placing their warband somewhere in their own territory. Maven Fae player places theirs in their territory. Samhain player places theirs. Maven player places theirs, and maybe down here just to avoid any accusations. And we should be good to go. We have set the stage. The remaining miniatures will be spawned onto the board as part of the turns. Ooh, it's thundering outside. The weather must like my idea. Little sweeping view across my board here to show you exactly what we have going on. And then we are going to play a game of Season of War. Seasons of War? Seasons of War. Okay, for the first round, we are not going to have any placement. We've already done our placement. So it's going to be activate by movement and then take an action, which is either going to be attacking an enemy or interacting with a set piece. I'm thinking this game is going to require a D6, which is kind of a shame because I was trying to get by without any external components. I even thought about like taking one of the miniatures left over and just like flipping it and using that as a sort of coin, but that's terrible. That's not going to work. We could play like a classic version of I Ching where we use sticks instead of coins, and we can use the range ruler, throw the sticks and see how they land to tell our fortune, to tell the fortunes of the Seasons of War. but that's not going to work either. So we'll just have to make do with what we have at the moment. Our couple here is going to be a melee, and we'll establish rules for that right now. If you have something that arguably could be a ranged weapon, then you have a ranged weapon. That's it. Your miniature is ranged. No bones about it. If your miniature is holding something in one hand, it is going to be an attack object. It's going to be a weapon, an attack object. If your miniature is holding something in their other hand, they will have something that they use for defense. And if your miniature is holding something in both hands, then that is going to be a large offensive weapon. The only kind of weapon there is, Ash. You're going to have your edge cases, but in those edge cases, you'll just consider the miniature to be melee, or we can establish a sort of magic system, but that's really going to depend on whether or not we feel we have to have the dice. Your miniature can have a ranged attack if it's pretty clear that they have something that they can throw, or multiple things rather that they can throw. Obviously, if you're holding a melee weapon, you can make that a ranged weapon if you're brave enough, but then you're going to lose it and have nothing. To me, this squirrel holding this nut seems like it is a ranged weapon. I know that it's a huge acorn, but honestly, I think that the squirrel should be a ranged character. I also kind of think that the gnome here should be a ranged character just by virtue of the fact it has a basket of what appears to be apples. And he's got a little hedgehog nearby to assist with melee. But I think it would be more interesting to say that this is his defensive capability. So the hedgehog is going to defend him from attacks. I did say one hand, other hand. One hand weapon, other hand defensive. And you can never have a miniature that just has a defensive capability. Like this fairy, this is a large gourd. She has a two-handed weapon. She's going to absolutely wreck anybody that she comes across. Okay, so maybe we do a sort of paper, scissor, rock system. If we don't play paper, scissor, rock, we establish that melee is better than ranged. Hold on, we'll have to set this up. We can absolutely do this. We have melee, we have defense, we have ranged, we have magic. Now, I shouldn't have drawn them like that. Okay, two-handed is going to be better than small weapon. Small weapon beats magic. Magic beats ranged. Do I want to say ranged beats shield? No, I don't know if I like that. Magic beats shield, and shield beats ranged. So if you're ranged and you fire at somebody who has a shield, it's not going to work. You just can't do it. Ergo, the miniatures that possess these capabilities will be able to immediately wreck the miniatures that possess these capabilities, the ones that follow in the arrows, if they are adjacent to that miniature, or if they have a ranged or magic attack and they are in line of sight to that mini. We still want to use the rangefinder, but at this point, I'm not really sure what the differences should be between the miniatures and their capabilities, because so far we have established that every miniature is going to just die in one hit because we're not using any sort of tokens to keep track of the hits of that miniature, which is fine because that's kind of how Age of Sigmar seems to be. You, at least with the beginner set, you'll move your model up to the other model, and if you win the dice roll, that model's dead. Okay, but we are going to have intersections here. Big sword should be better than shield. Shield is better than small sword. Ranged is better than magic. Small sword is better than ranged. Magic is better than big sword. We have our haphazard star, and after we clean that up a bit, this is what we have. So that's going to establish basically what minis can attack what minis. So if you have a little bit of planning at the beginning of the game, you can take out the miniatures that you know are going to be a threat to your last mini standing, and then you guys can just basically trade attacks. I want there to be some kind of way for the sword player to take out the double-handed weapon player, however. The single-handed melee weapon versus the double-handed. So the way that we're going to do this is we'll need interactables that can provide you with magic. So not just an interactable that provides you with a ranged power, but something that can provide you with magic as well. Or we're going to have to establish a rule where if your miniature is up against a miniature that is up against an object, then you can have the advantage. I don't know why yet, just maybe makes sense. Like if, so I don't know how to categorize these. I kind of think that we have two characters here. One is holding the other. So maybe the bride is using the groom as a weapon, a double-handed weapon. She just is able to like sling him around. They are both able to do this actually because they are both holding each other. He's copping a feel. He is being a very naughty skeleton man. I bet he has a bow. Never mind. that's enough of that. We're just going to play around. So here we go. The last model standing wins. I kind of like the idea of if you can capture the objective, then you get to just pick off one of the opponent's models. We're keeping it pretty simple. We don't want this to be dirty at all. Okay, so move and attack. This is a double-handed weapon. We want to say, what, 5? We could say anywhere between your line of sight. You can just run between, you're fine. You can move this anywhere at all between your building's lines. But as soon as you go outside of that, you've got to use your ranged movement. So going by the chart, ranged is going to be able to beat double-handed, so this squirrel has advantage against these guys. We don't want these guys to get taken out by the squirrel. So we're gonna move right up next to him, and I'll be trying to think of ways to mitigate the weakness versus advantage as we're playing. So coming up right up next to the squirrel cannot throw this nut at this target. They have advantage against them, but when you are standing right next to them, that advantage goes away. This becomes a normal melee weapon. There we go. That's how we're going to do that. You become a melee. And if a ranged becomes a melee, then a magic maybe becomes a defensive. We'll get into that though. Maybe we'll get into that. I don't know. I'm trying. Okay, but they can't attack this miniature because it has an advantage, right? Not yet. If this miniature doesn't move and get out of the way though. All right, skulls and crow and bat, they'll move over here. Well, you can move in your enemy's line as long as it's after the placement rules. So there we go. They're going to go right here because now they're going to be in line of sight, line of fire to the gnome character, and they are going to attack. How do we want to do this? Facing. Facing needs to be important if we're going to be doing things this way and not using dice. Okay, so pretty objectively, every mini is going to be facing one direction or another. We don't have the convenience of a base to help us out with this, a square base of any kind. But thankfully, the miniatures seem to be very clear in what direction they're facing, and we'll just say whatever miniature has their head facing north is facing north. I mean, it's going to come down to the direction of where they're looking. So we will establish further rules that say if you are disadvantaged in this chart, then you need to be behind a miniature in order to attack it. Ranged versus ranged is not really an advantage or a disadvantage, but because this miniature is behind this Maven Fae, it is going to be able to attack it and take it off the board, and that's that. We'll be able to do a miniature placement on the next round. But now it's the Maven Fae's turn, and they have a squirrel that is unable to make a ranged attack. It needs to move away from this set before it can do anything. We'll have to put facing in the steps of the player's turn. So we will do a movement, then an action, then a facing. How about that? These guys, they should be able to fire. I don't want to say they should be able to face exactly the direction of the miniature that they are firing at. And if we do a movement and then a facing, then an action, that might be better. So I guess we'll do movement, then facing, then the action, then they'll have taken the gnome out. So movement, they're breaking free. We might have to come up with some break free rules. Then facing, then action. And ranged has advantage against large melee, so they would be taking out this couple. I don't like the ease in which that happened. But it's now the Samhain player's turn, and they can, if they wish, take revenge. So it's time to put the dog on the board. And I'm going to say you can't do anything with this miniature. I guess they'd start out at the spawn point, technically. So pick a spawn point and then go from there. Can't do anything with them after you've activated or placed them on the board. You can't activate the miniatures you place. That's a better way to word that. We can activate our miniature that was already placed, though. So we need some way to get behind this blasted squirrel, but in anticipation of the enemy player placing a miniature in one of their spawn points, we're going to go ahead and move our skull and crows, and we're going to move them way over here, and then we are going to turn them, actually, and that's going to be the end of our movement and our turn steps, facing steps. We don't want to use turn in too many different ways here. Should they now attack the squirrel? Or should I change the rules to be move, action, then facing? I think I'm going to do that instead. So move, and then you have to forego the action, then facing. So they wouldn't have been able to take out the gnome in the first turn, but I'd like to move with what's happened so far as it's happening. So move, facing, action. Move, facing, action. You can skip the movement and do facing and then action, or you can, or wait, I did that backwards. Move, action, facing. Move, action, facing. That's the way it should be. You can skip movement and then do action, then facing, or you can skip movement and action and do facing, or you can skip just the action, do the movement and the facing, but you can't change the order in which the three things take place. Okay, so now the Maven Fae player is able to place their hedgehog. This guy looks so cool. He's gonna be so defensive, right? I don't know about defensive. We don't really have defensive tactics established beyond our chart of advantage versus disadvantage. But I really think a D6 would go so far in this scenario. A D6-less war game, though, sounds like just an amazing accomplishment, if I'm being completely honest. And we can also get around needing a D6 if we do write individual rules for our miniatures. It's just, that's going to require you to write those rules on the spot for each miniature that comes out, instead of relying on a sort of script that tries to cover every possibility, which is what I would like to do with this. But oh well. It's fine. We're just not going to give the hedgehog any sort of specific thing. This porcupine is going to have... Oh, he's not armed, technically. He doesn't have anything in his hands, so I don't know how to treat that. I guess if that's going to be the case, he'll be magical. Unarmed will be magical, and that counts as this other type of ranged attack. I think that's what we're doing. And by the way, we could add more things into this. Pokemon rules, basically. If you want to add something, then you can add it like here, and then you could go ahead and keep the existing stuff, but you could have the sword have advantage over it, and it have advantage over the staff, and the other three things present could have advantage or disadvantage over it accordingly. Pokemon basically has this, but for all of the, 17 types. The framework is there. You can do it too. I really just want to say, I really like how this looks on the table. It looks like something is happening. Like there is a game in progress. It's oddly cozy. I don't know that I like the scenario necessarily that I've built, but I think that it has promise on this table. Maybe it'll have promise on your table if you choose to pursue this. And obviously you can take this idea wherever you like in terms of what rules would you like to change and what feels better at your table. Would you rather incorporate dice? I would just be careful of the scale creep, because as I said earlier, if you get stuff in and you start using every single idea you have and you map out all the possibilities, more often than not, you'll end up not using any of it. Idea 8, then test. Then test. Don't skip the test. Don't just imagine the test happening, because the playing of the test part is where the magic happens. That's where the really useful stuff comes to you, and then the game becomes your own and the ideas feel like they are your own. Okay, so we are at what point now? We've spawned, we've moved, we've faced. We're following MAF, movement, action, facing. MAF, M-A-F, MAF. That's how I'm going to remember. Okay, spawn, movement, action, facing. So SMAF. We're going to spawn in the last fighter, and they're going to go right here next to the dog. No, we already did that. We spawned our porcupine. How could I forget? Movement, they technically have line of sight to the dog. So let's do a movement of, we're going to call this just a humble, 4. We're going to be very loose again with the ruler, rangefinder, all that. I don't know if 4 should also be our ranged attack, so maybe we'll say that it is. But we are now in the line of sight of our crows still if we don't impose a range limit. We didn't impose a range limit yet, and I don't have ranges set or defined for any of the miniatures, any of the fighters in any warband, so we'll just go ahead and take out this dog before he has a chance to do anything. Haha, that was the fun option, right? Well, other player is going to go ahead and spawn their next fighter, and that fighter could very well act as a distraction for the Maven Fae. Just like it has here, this one is now able to move. Samhain Fae, or Maven Fae, forgot to face. They forgot the facing step. Too bad. You took your finger off the piece, you're done. You move, you say what action you're doing, you face, then you take your hands off, and if you forget, that's on you. So they are now going to attack. I know I took my hands off. I needed to do that to illustrate. I don't know if I really want to go with that chess rule, but whatever. They have line of sight, line of fire to the squirrel, so they are going to attack the squirrel at the side. I think you should be able to attack same types from their sides, so away goes the squirrel. Now it's the Maven Fae player's turn, and they can do a movement. They're actually going to move right here to the light, and they're going to do an interact, and we won't have to change our facing. We're just going to be protected from the Samhain Fae player right now. We need to watch and see what they do. We need to study that chart of weaknesses, advantage, disadvantage a little bit more. Samhain Fae player, the The Halloween Spooky Veil player is able to place their last warband. They'll place it over here, polar opposite. And maybe I should go ahead and say, if you spawn at one of your bases, then the next time you spawn, you're going to spawn at your other. And maybe I also say that you put your warbands behind those areas at the beginning of the game. So you go ahead and place your warband behind, and then the opposing player will know which ones can spawn from which points, and you'll also know which ones will spawn from what points. But I don't know, if that feels a little too messy or a little too unnecessary, then don't do it. Okay, we're going to do movement here, and I'm not using the rangefinder because you have infinite range that you can move between your own ley line. That's what we'll do. We'll call them ley lines. It's calling them enemy lines or territory. Did I maybe already say territory? Don't really have an action we can do. We're just going to be a melee player. So we're going to turn and face, and then that's it. And we actually have a second fighter on the board, so we can have them come all the way up and also turn to face, and then that's it. It's 1 against 3 at this point. It is not looking good, but the Maven Fae player is able to place their next fighter, and we are going to go ahead and say, even though I broke this already, we're establishing this rule now. When you place your fighter, you have to do so with the fighter touching the base, and if they are touching the base, they are not subject to attacks of any kind from the opposing player. They are protected by default. So that first, what was it, the mummy dog, they would not have been able to have been taken out at that point in the game. So we have a 2 against 3, and a strict melee has advantage against a ranged, and this has been established as a ranged. This has been established as a magic. Magic does not have advantage against melee. Magic has advantage against defense and against double-handed weaponry, and that's it. They have disadvantage against the other 2 types. So they need to basically steer clear of both of these war and fighters. They could probably fight this one. This one I haven't established as anything. I think it would be just fair to say that it has melee and defense. That would kind of make it OP though, because if you are... Well, it's got melee when it's attacking and defense when it's not attacking, I guess. Makes the most sense to me. Okay, but magic has an advantage against defense. So if I could just see that miniature, it would be great. But this gravestone is blocking my line of sight. Actually, I'm pretty excited over this. So I think we've gone on long enough, and I've really established enough of a framework that the smaller details could work themselves out. If we're still trying to avoid using tokens, and we're still trying to avoid using dice, it's really, really hard to not use dice. I am struggling, but it can be done. Some warbands are inherently just going to be boned, though. No pun intended, because they're going to be made up in their package of a combination that just has no advantage over another combination. This is totally up to chance. It's something I don't necessarily want to leave up to chance, but that's kind of the random nature of oh, they've released more miniatures at the local Dollar Tree. I'd like to write up the lore and the basic rule set as I have them now, but I need to be fueled by your interest in this. So if you think that this is a stroke of genius and you would like me to explore it a little bit more, I will do that, and then we'll have another video a little bit later that incorporates a lot more of the rule set after it's been refined. I did want to kind of show you some of the other statues that I have collected over the years at my local Dollar Tree, which is not Family Dollar, where I got these initial sets. But I think it would be totally fine if you got your resin sculpts, as long as they're made of the same thing, which these are made of the same thing, and they have the same purpose. They're decorative. They're for indoor, outdoor, whatever. So these would be totally legal bases that you could buy. And right now, I don't have a reason for the bases to be different mechanically, nor do I want you to be able to place a third base on the board, or along the edge of the board anyway. I guess you could totally place them on the board, and then they could have a different kind of effect, some kind of boon/bane. I don't know if I want a spawn point necessarily, unless we are using a second placemat. Then if you have a second placemat, like if each player brings their own placemat like you would in a game of Underworlds, and you place them however you want, then you'll end up with 3 additional edges. I would say 4, but where the placemats link, I don't think that there should be any sort of bases at all. I also kind of think that if you wanted to get rid of the rangefinder, then you could do that, and then the range of magical and ranged attacks could just be infinite. Movement could be infinite as long as it's between your own ley lines. That kind of brings the gameplay loop down to just moving, positioning, firing on rails, and I don't like that. So I'd like to keep the rangefinders at least until I get movement values in. And I also wanted to say with these decorations, we could probably write up some rules that give them unique functionalities depending on the physical features that are sculpted onto the bases themselves. I don't know what that could look like at this time. Maybe they could have a sort of respawn power. They could bring one of your miniatures back to life and then you would remove the base from the board. Stuff like this, which is obviously Christmas Village because it's clearly just plastic. This is a no. This is an illegal piece. It's not because it's a church. If it were church-like, but it was a resin statue, I would totally allow it. But we gotta establish a standard. We have to establish expectation here, and that's what I want to do. But come springtime, we'll have all sorts of spring-themed decorations and fairies and mushrooms and gnomes and bridges and stuff. And after a while, it might get a little hard to tell what's from what season. But I think if you actually are sitting down and cataloging all this stuff out, it really shouldn't be that hard to tell. I mean, we have a fairy here, which you might associate with spring or so on, but she's holding this gourd, and so she is unmistakably a celebration of the harvest type fairy. Anyway, that is about all for this video. I could go on until I have actually had one side win, but I did what I really wanted to do, and that is actually get these miniatures on the table, explain the concept, work through some framework, establish some fundamentals that I think are vital to the actual game design itself, and inspire you to maybe do the same. And that's the key to it all, really. As long as you're inspired to go out and do the exact same thing, do it. And then tell me what kind of changes you would make. And again, it would be way better if you actually did this, or at least did this arbitrarily by watching the video, and then told me what you would do to change things. And if you've had skirmish games that you have invented in the past that you actually thought were fun, you should let me know about those experiences as well. Did you play with friends, with family? Did you have more than one game? That's key. Was it fun enough that you had repeat plays? Can you imagine? I sell all of this as like a boxed eBay lot. Ash Quest's Seasons of War skirmish game, the only copy available. $6,000. Who would buy it? I'd finally be able to complete my Warhammer Quest expansion collection. All right, that's it for now, guys. I hope you leave here an inspired person, and I will see you in the next exciting and hopefully also inspiring adventure. So until then, have a fantastic rest of your day. Thank you so much for your kind attention. Comment, please, down below, and onward for now.